Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Chuck Todd reporting in Washington as the Supreme Court has once again overturned decades of precedent in a landmark decision that stands to fundamentally shift American society. Earlier today, the court's 6 conservative judges effectively put an end to affirmative action at American colleges and universities, striking down race-based admission policies, specifically at Harvard and at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, ruling them unconstitutional and in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, the same amendment that has been a cornerstone of civil rights law in America. All 6 justices in the majority were appointed by Republican presidents, 3 of them by Donald Trump. The 3 dissenting justices were all appointed by Democrats. In the majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts called affirmative action policies their own form of racial stereotyping, writing, "Many universities have for too long wrongly concluded that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. This nation's constitutional history does not tolerate that choice." The court's liberal justices issued some scathing dissents, multiple dissents, by the way. There were also multiple majority opinions, too, accusing the majority of ignoring court precedent and willfully disregarding racial inequalities in America. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote the official dissent. No one benefits from ignorance. Although formal race-linked legal barriers are gone, race still matters to the lived experiences of all Americans in innumerable ways. And today's ruling makes things worse, not better. The political reaction to these decisions has been, in a word, intense. From the Capitol to the campaign trail, Republicans praising the decision and criticizing, quote, woke liberals, and Democrats condemning the decision and the conservative court itself. That included President Biden, who delivered remarks from the White House today urging colleges to continue using policies that foster diversity, saying, "We cannot let this decision be the last word."
And I strongly disagree with the court's decision. The truth is, we all know it, discrimination still exists in America. Discrimination still exists in America. Discrimination still exists in America. Today's decision does not change that. I know today's court decision is a severe disappointment to so many people, including me. But we cannot let the decision be a permanent setback for the country.
The president also responded to a bunch of shouted questions, including one about the legitimacy of this current Supreme Court. Here's how he responded.
President Biden, the Congressional Black Caucus said the Supreme Court has thrown into question its own legitimacy. Is this a rogue court?
This is not a normal court.
NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett joins me to help break down this ruling. And in a moment, I'll be joined by NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton, who has reaction from the campus of Harvard. But Laura, let me start with you. Everybody saw this ruling coming, and in a weird way, we saw it coming the day the voting rights decision and the decision in the Alabama redistricting case came out. It was like, oh, look, is John Roberts preparing for a decision that a lot of people expected? I think what's surprising to me is how many different concurrent opinions they were. John Roberts doesn't seem to be speaking from anybody but himself and one other.
And it's interesting that given his feelings about affirmative action, which have not been a secret, that he didn't want to just come out and say, I'm going as far as overruling the past, 40-something years of precedent. And instead, they've come up with this interesting idea about using race in a very limited way in an essay, as opposed to just saying, we're getting out of the business of race entirely. We thought this was wrongly decided. It's much like what they did with Roe, right, Chuck? They could have just said, we thought Grutter was wrong when it was decided back in 2003, and just like we thought Roe was wrongly decided. But instead, they haven't done that, and yet everybody else except for Justice Roberts seems to think that they have done that. Surely Justice Thomas thinks that they have, and the dissent thinks that they have. And so it's interesting how they've decided to couch this, and it's interesting that they've now sort of opened the door to, I think, what's going to be the next set of cases about how you use race in admissions.
Well, and I was just going to say, Laura, what else does this open the door for? I saw a lot of reactions from the right using DEI as sort of the code word here, the code phrase. I think one group calling it, all right, college DEI is over, now on to corporate America. Is there a way in court that we're going to see employment law attacked here?
I think it already is. So the conservative financier who has backed these lawsuits for decades, Edward Bloom, has a case in California right now about this very issue, challenging scholarships, in corporations. And so I think that's where this is headed next, is to the employment context, because just like in the realm of education, there is Title VII, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race in the employment context. And so I think that is certainly where this fight is headed next. It gets tricky, though. I mean, corporate America filed an enormous amount of paper in this case saying, please do not take away affirmative action because we need it for business imperatives. So I think there's some interesting sort of cross currents there if the court tries to take this on in the employment context.
Laura, I was surprised there wasn't a distinction between public universities and private universities.
Yeah, and I think many wondered whether they would try to split the baby in some way on that score, but I think they just decided if we're going to go this far, we're going to go all the way. And as I said, this is not a court that has been at all secret about their feelings about affirmative action. They just didn't have the votes before.
Does this mean we're just going to have more court cases? Because now, if somebody feels as if they didn't get in because of race, because they, now, I mean, you're just going to see more lawsuits, right? Or they weren't considered because of their race. How is this going to make for a busier court docket?
Perhaps, but they take a while to get here. The one against Harvard and UNC, these have been going on since 2014. So they take a while to actually go through a trial and then go through an appeal and then work their way up to the Supreme Court. But I certainly think if this was an attempt to sort of close the book on this chapter for the court and, again, saying getting out of the business of race entirely, I don't think that's what they've done.
Well, I was just going to say, the other question I have is, how do they decide whether a university is solely using race or just sort of using race?
And that has always been the question. I sort of wondered, how would anyone ever really know what's going on and sort of sitting around at admissions tables trying to figure out somebody's file? Because the schools will tell you it's not a checking the box exercise. It's not that you check the box for one race and you automatically get in. They would tell you, we try to look at the whole package. Is race part of that? Absolutely. You can't take it out. But it's not as if it's an automatic you get in school because you happen to be one race or the other. And so I've often wondered, how would anybody really know how you got in? And the truth is that you sue someone and then you get discovery. And in this case, there were some bad emails and they made their way into the record, and clearly the court was bothered by them.
Laura Jarrett, busy day. We've been preparing for this one for a while, and yet they're still not done.
Not done.
Means we're going to see you tomorrow. Laura Jarrett, thank you. Turning now to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Antonia Hilton's been reporting from one of the college campuses at the center of today's Supreme Court decision. Now, Antonia, we should remind people it's late June, which means you probably had a fairly empty college campus today as you're been trying to get some reaction there. But how will this fundamentally change Harvard in the next 10 years?
Well, Chuck, first I should say this campus is almost never empty because when the students leave, the tourists and the prospective students, the kids applying, all flood in. And so I actually got to talk to high schoolers who are planning to apply to Harvard this fall or in 2 years and get to talk to them about this because it's actually going to affect them more than it does current undergraduates. I've also spoken to undergraduates, some of whom have summer jobs who are nearby, and both groups right now, they are reeling, Chuck. And I think one thing that's important for me to point out is that this doesn't really, the conversation here on campus among young people doesn't really break down along the same political lines that we're seeing more broadly across the country. It's not really about left or right. It's not really about black and white or black versus Asian students, which has been so much of the conversation around this lawsuit here out of Harvard. Because what we're seeing is a multiracial coalition of students who are demanding meetings with administrators so that they can talk about what the school is going to do now. What do their new initiatives, their programs, what are they going to look like? And full disclosure, I was a student here who was at time asked to do the task of going out, talking to other Black and Latino students, encouraging them to feel comfortable applying to Harvard and seeing themselves as part of this community, which, historically excluded them. Take a listen to conversations I had with two students. The first is a Black and Vietnamese student. The second is the head of the Black Students Association. And both of them have been reeling and processing this news today.
I mean, I think it's incredibly disheartening to hear, especially knowing the negative impact that will have on these institutions and on communities of color. And a decision like this does affect individuals, but it also affects families and it affects communities.
This is quite the blow to Harvard's community, but I like to think of it as an opportunity for us to take action and put pressure on Harvard. It could include taking away legacy and donor admissions and other things that give unfair advantages to communities of privilege.
Elise, who you just heard from there, kind of spells out what's going to happen here next, Chuck, which is you're going to see students and faculty members come after legacy admissions, preferences for kids who have parents or relatives who work at schools like Harvard. That's going to be the next major stage of the conversation here as they try to make more room for kids from diverse communities. Harvard right now hasn't committed to any one thing, but they have released a statement saying that they're still committed to diversity. This is an important part of their culture and their values here, and that they're taking time to figure out what comes next and how they're going to comply with this new precedent and, you know, build their path forward. I think it's going to take years before we fully have a picture of what the result of all of this is going to look like, and certainly there are going to be people here who are studying that.
Well, the admissions process for many people is a black box anyway, and now it may become more so as universities try to figure out how to comply with federal law. Antonia Hilton on the campus of Harvard. Antonia, thank you. Let me bring in now the president of Howard University, Dr. Wayne Frederick. Dr. Frederick, first of all, I know this is a bittersweet time for you. This is the end of your tenure. You're going to be president emeritus, I guess, and you're handing the baton off. I know that feeling myself, and I'm sure it's both exciting and scary at the same time. But let me ask you about today. What does this mean for Howard?
You know, this means several things. First and foremost, we've seen an increase in applications recently, and I think some of that obviously is because of what happened with the George Floyd murder, and I think a real strong look at race in this country. But some of it also is because of the excellence that we put forward in our appeal to students. As a result, we have our largest enrollment at 13,000 plus. The reality, though, is a large number of those students are still from low-income backgrounds. And so from a capacity point of view, I am concerned that we are already close to a limit of what we can, bring in. And then I think when you look at the entire historically Black college and university pool, as it were, we have 3% of the higher ed institutions in this country accounting for 25% of the bachelor's degrees awarded to African Americans. So clearly, these institutions have been important, but clearly the rest of the institutions in the country are not carrying their load. This could decrease their interest and involvement in educating a diverse population even further.
How much do you feel like this ruling impacts your admissions policy, or the admissions policies of HBCUs in particular?
At Howard, it could be dramatic. We've graduated more Black physicians in this country since medical education started. And in our medical school application process in particular, we have a supplemental application that speaks to whether you're from an underserved or underrepresented minority population. It speaks to what your experience was like in high school. Was it a disadvantage circumstance? And also, what is your intent in terms of future work to work in such a community? My concern is, despite Justice Roberts' opinion that he wrote, he specifically outlined that you can write that in an essay. Right. He specifically didn't say you can ask that question. And I am concerned about what types of lawsuits could be filed as a result of somebody, for instance, not getting into my medical school. And why am I concerned about that? We got as many as 11,000 applications for only 130 spots. We have the 5th most selective medical school in the country. So that could be a challenge. So
you expect to you might be sued on your admission practices just based on this ruling in the medical school. It sounds like you're anticipating this.
We definitely are going to have to anticipate this, and we definitely are also going to have to prepare ourselves to defend our position because of how important our production of Black doctors and the overall health of Black Americans has been.
Let me ask you a larger picture question here. The case that was brought against Harvard involved Asian American students. So how do you parse the idea that you had students who believed their race was impacting them negatively? I mean, this is what it almost were pitting minorities against each other.
Yeah, you know, I think that's also a very complicated discussion. I think the issue here was not to compromise anyone by affirmative action, but to ensure that you were supporting those who otherwise, throughout their lives and throughout generations, did not have the same opportunity. Again, one of the opinions written, I believe the opinion written by Justice Thomas, outlined the fact that this current generation should not be responsible for what happened before. But the reality is generational wealth for Black Americans have been impacted. Right. Generational opportunities for education have been impacted. And if generational wealth is impacted, it means the opportunity to go to certain types of schools, live in certain neighborhoods, and to have certain opportunities have been impacted. So when a student writes an essay, for instance, about their experiences, they don't necessarily have diverse experiences. They didn't get to play water polo. They didn't get to go to concerts, et cetera. So I don't see how it doesn't hand down. And on the issue of Asian Americans versus, you know, others, I think, again, it's about educational opportunities that people may have had coming through the system and trying to make sure that you're giving an opportunity for everyone. And if you look at Asian American admissions, they've been consistently on the rise at highly selective schools. And I don't think that that has been compromised by affirmative action.
Dr. Wayne A.I. Frederick, Howard University. This is, like I said, I believe it was your last graduation, your last commencement. But I look forward to staying in touch. Appreciate you sharing your perspective with us.
Good luck to you, too. You've been absolutely fantastic, so I appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate you as well. Let me turn now to Lonnie Chen. He's a public policy fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institute. He's an alum of Harvard, and he has a law degree. Mr. Chen, it's good to see you. So,
hey, Chuck.
I feel like California went through this, and you quite a bit over the last 30 years with the in-state battles. I'm thinking of Ward Connerly back in the 90s here. What was your reaction to today's ruling?
Well, I don't think the ruling's surprising, given the composition of the court. I think they've been signaling this for some time. And I frankly think that those who argue this is some significant sea change are misreading the case. They're misreading the law. At the end of the day, what we have here is we have a court that's reaffirming a couple of basic principles, one being that the explicit use of race in college admissions in the way that it was done by both Harvard and UNC, Harvard to the detriment of Asian Americans, that is a proven matter, would no longer be allowed. And that's not inconsistent with what the court has said before, by the way. So in my view, this is one of those things where the impact we'll see. But the reality is in a lot of states, affirmative action, as you note, is already outlawed. California being one of them, and other populous states are part of that category as well. So, you know, universities will allow this to play out, but the notion that this is some massive sea change or some massive movement away from where the law is, I think is a misapprehension of where the law has been.
Look, you're familiar. You're not in the UC system. You're at Stanford. But you're familiar. I'm sure you know exactly how difficult that admissions process is. They went to zip code based, correct? I believe. I mean, what would you say? What have you observed that has maybe been effective at creating diverse populations?
Well, first of all, accounting for the entirety of a student's experience, and that includes, for example, their socioeconomic background, that includes their life story. There are many different elements of that. And by the way, the court leaves the door open for that in this decision. They leave the door open for individuals to express as part of their backgrounds the role that race, socioeconomic status, any number of different factors can play. And it's a challenging balancing act. I get it. Universities are going to have to look at what they're doing and figure out whether it's consistent with what the court has called for today. But I think fundamentally this notion of seeing the individual as an individual as opposed to a set of characteristics, I think that's the system that we're trying to migrate toward. And I think colleges and workplaces, they will adapt. They will adapt, and they will be better for it.
Do you think, though, that this impedes an institution's ability? You know, let's talk about freedom, various freedoms here. An institution of higher learning believes it needs this diverse student body to provide the education they want to provide. How much leeway should they be given? Because they used to be given a lot of leeway for that, and now they're giving less. but it's also not really defined on what that looks like either.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to see. I do think one side effect of all of this is that we are going to see litigations around a number of different systems.
Both sides of the ideological spectrum here, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we'll have a clear sense in a couple of years of how it all sorts out. But I think requiring universities to think through what they're trying to do and the goal of promoting a diverse student body, as the court reaffirms, is an important one. I think the question becomes, how do you get there? And what do you do to achieve those aims? And I think one of the challenges the court rightfully points out is, at what point is that goal achieved? At what point can you say we have done what we need to do to reach that goal?
Well, we still don't have this measuring stick. This has been the problem with the goals of diversity. What is the measuring stick on affirmative action? Right. Is it income inequality between whites and blacks being less than 5 percentage points? Like, what do you measure? And the court didn't outline that either.
No, and I think the challenge is that the proponents of affirmative action had a tough time articulating what their goals were as well. And I think both sides have that challenge going forward, because I think that they're, a student body and a workforce that reflects America's diversity it is an important thing. But the question is that in and of itself the goal, or is there something more? And I think some of these questions remain unanswered.
You'll see it in some polling. Generally, people are in favor of the idea, and they get tripped up over the specifics and implementation. Sure. And I have a feeling that's basically the conversation we just had, I think, there, Lonnie.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lonnie Chen, always a pleasure to get your perspective. Thank you, sir.
Great to see you, Chuck. Thank you.
All right, coming up, we're going to stick with today's breaking news from the court. And as I hinted at, some interesting polling to make you understand how the public views of this. We'll also have new reaction from President Biden and some reaction from the campaign trail. That's next. Plus, on the issue of race in America, a first-in-the-nation's reparations report happened to come out today, laying out the recommendations to compensate Black Californians for the harms of slavery. You may recall we did a Meet the Press reports on this a couple weeks ago. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back to our coverage of the breaking news out of the Supreme Court, which today struck down affirmative action in collegiate admissions. And as I mentioned before the break, it's an issue that divides the American public, and one that could be front and center as we head into 2024. So joining me now at the big board for a look at the polling on this issue is our own Steve Kornacki. And Steve, boy, the difference between saying the phrase affirmative action and race and ethnic based seems like those phrases alone can change public opinion.
Yeah, I really think when you look at the polling on this, and there's a lot out there that comes at it from different angles, it's almost how wide the lens is. Here's what I mean by that. This is our own NBC poll. When you just ask about affirmative action as a concept, is affirmative action still needed, with the stipulation that there's no rigid quotas? That's what we asked. This was just in April. A majority, 53%, said they agree with that statement, that affirmative action is still needed. And in fact, over the last decade, that's an increase. It was 45-45 in 2013. 53-42 now. The biggest movement actually among white voters over the last decade to get it to majority support for affirmative action. And then here's another poll. This one's from the Washington Post that asks more broadly about the concept of diversity, about encouraging diversity in college admissions. Programs designed to increase the racial diversity on college campuses. You find very strong support here for that general concept. Almost 2/3 that goes across racial lines. Nearly 60% of whites agree with that, larger with African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans. But it's when you narrow the lens to what the Supreme Court was deciding today, and you ask specifically and explicitly about race and ethnicity being factors used in deciding, making decisions about college admissions, where the numbers change. So here again from a Washington Post poll, Supreme Court banning colleges and universities from considering race and ethnicity in admissions. Again, almost 2-to-1, folks say they support that. The Supreme Court banning using race and ethnicity. And again, look across racial ethnic lines here. Strong support among whites, 60% among Hispanics, 65% among Asian Americans, even among African Americans. It's close to 50-50 in this poll. So when you talk really specifically about what the Supreme Court is doing today, you get some result like this. And then I think one other thing worth mentioning quickly, you were talking about this with Lonnie Chen. We do have of a real world experiment. You get outside the polling world and you get to California and what happened in 2020. Because as you had mentioned, in 96, by initiative petition, California banned affirmative action. Supporters of affirmative action in 2020 thought the world had changed in California. More diverse, more liberal. It was time to put it back on the ballot. They believed voters would reinstate affirmative action for public universities. Instead, it went down 57 to 43. This is on the same day that Joe Biden was winning California by 30 points, reinstating affirmative action in public colleges and universities in one of the most liberal states in the country, lost by 14 points.
Steve Kornacki with some important context on the polling on this issue. Again, sometimes it's hard to get a black and white response, no pun intended there, on a nuanced question like this. So, moments ago, President Biden weighed in again on the affirmative action decision with MSNBC's Nicole Wallace. He expounded on what he meant earlier today when he said this Supreme Court is not normal. Here's a longer explanation.
You said this court is not normal. What did you mean?
What I meant with that is it's done more to unravel basic rights and basic decisions than any court in recent history. And that's what I meant by not normal. It's gone out of its way to, I mean, for example, take a look at overruling Roe v. Wade. Take a look at what the decision today. Take a look at how it's ruled on a number of issues that have been precedent for 50, 60 years sometimes. And that's what I meant by not normal.
I got a panel here now. Leanne Caldwell, Washington Post live anchor and co-author of the Daily 202 newsletter. Simone Sanders Townsend, the former senior advisor to Vice President Harris and host of Simone on MSNBC, and Republican strategist and NBC News political analyst Rick Tyler. Welcome to all of you. Leanne, it was interesting to see, by the way, the president immediately almost pivot back to Roe. I mean, I think that, as a campaign issue here, but I want to focus more on affirmative action. First, let's talk about this Supreme Court. This was telegraphed for arguably all year long. And then almost to add to the telegraphing, John Roberts got Kavanaugh to agree with him on what happened in Alabama and redistricting, and almost to, quote, soften the blow here. Should I be that politically cynical in looking at this?
Well, I think you're just saying what many people who are political are thinking. We don't know if there's any direct connection.
And
we never will.
Until he passes away and we read his notes and he never puts the notes down.
Right, exactly. So who knows? But those previous decisions were relatively surprising. And so it makes us think what was going to happen with the affirmative action case. I thought it was going to come down as the last case. It came down before being the last case, before they headed out of town. But anyway, I was speaking with the dean of a public university earlier this week, and she told me that I asked about this, and she said that colleges for the past year have been making alternative backup plans on what to do next. And so it's going to be really fascinating. And I think there's going to be a lot of lessons learned from those 9 states that have already banned affirmative action and what those schools have done to try to maintain some sort of fairness and diversity at their universities. I
think you'll see a lot of first-generation college scholarships, first-generation, first time going to college, things like that on that front. Simone, I thought was interesting, and this is what I'm not sure is Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh had one opinion of what they ruled on. There were 3 other concurring opinions. This tells me none of those conservatives want John Roberts speaking for them. And by the way, the other justices seem to read something more into this ruling than what Roberts and Kavanaugh wrote.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I do think people should read the actual majority opinion as well as all the concurring and the dissenting opinions, because in the majority opinion, the court writes in the majority opinion, it says, look, they make the case that all of the cases that have come before the Supreme Court since Brown versus the Board of Education are all driving towards this one particular piece about the Equal Protection Clause. And that piece is that there should be no, as they say, government race-based discrimination policies within the government. Okay, they're saying race-based discriminations, i.e. anything that takes race into account. I was very struck by Justice Thomas's concurring opinion, where he Justice Thomas, I mean, a man who is, frankly, a beneficiary of race-based conscious policymaking, who literally says in the last page of his concurring opinion, I understand for people that look like me, there's still economic and political, basically, he asserts the gaps, but I believe that America is going to do their best to right those wrongs and live up to our creed. Okay, well, the way that those wrongs are righted is by active and oftentimes surgical and very intentional policies, of which race-based conscious decision-making has been one of them.
Rick, I think this is the frustrating thing about this, whether you're a proponent or not a proponent of affirmative action, which is we've never agreed upon the measuring stick. Not the measuring stick with which to decide whether we need it or don't need it. We don't know, we know it isn't good yet. And that's sort of, it becomes almost everybody's own gut feeling.
Well, we don't know what it is, and Harvard would like us to leave it to them to determine the composition.
And why is that wrong? They're a private institution.
They are a private institution, and I would say that institutions are strengthened by diversity. I think that's a legitimate goal for institutions to have. And the question is, how do we go about it? Now, Harvard is a bit hypocritical here because, one, by race consideration, Harvard implicitly implies that certain races stereotypically fall into some category that they need help to get into school. We don't know if that's true or not. Two, we don't know what Hispanic really means. We don't know what Asian really means because there are lots of different Asian subgroups. And so are they going to decide, what are they exactly going to decide? Plus, Harvard, by the way, admits roughly 43% of their admissions are not race-based, they are legacy-based. That means you have to be a relative or a faculty or someone who works at the college or a recruited athlete to get in. So before everything starts, half the admissions are cut off from people who went there before. So the best way to get into Harvard is that your father went there and gave a $5 million contribution to Harvard. That's how you get into Harvard. So if there's an economic argument, then the economic argument should have been to get rid of the legacy students and not the affirmative action students.
And I think you're going to see some of that.
I agree with Rick.
No, and I think we're going to see, and the question, though, is to what end?
But let me just say this, because we're just talking about affirmative action, broad-based. To be very clear, what the Supreme Court weighed in on today was race-based decision-making, race-conscious decision-making. They didn't do away with affirmative action altogether, because if you look at the numbers, white women are the biggest beneficiaries of affirmative action. Right. That's where we take gender into account, right? So we're only talking about race. The argument that Rick just made here, I think, is a very important one. We talk about economics, race-based, race-conscious decision-making. It benefits people of color who are, in fact, not poor, okay? It also benefits people of color whom are locked out of opportunity because someone says, oh, they're not a good fit.
Where does the politics go from this next? Because I've already seen on the right, almost a rebranding of this as college DEI, because we know that there is an obsession on a small band of folks on the right. Ron DeSantis likes to talk about this. We're going after business for having diversity initiatives. Should we expect lawsuits there now next?
I think so. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not involved in these lawsuits, but politically speaking, I mean, this has already been challenged for a very, very long time. There's been affirmative action cases before the Supreme Court.
My entire adult lifetime, there's been something, whether it's been California, it's been because of propositions that people put on the ballot. I mean, we've been litigating it ever since we started it.
Right, and every time there's a new effort at diversity, that is also challenged. And you mentioned DEI, and that's the latest thing, and that's something that in Congress, Republicans are talking about trying to defund DEI programs in the federal government to balance the budget. Of course, that's a very small fraction of federal spending. So I don't know where this goes next. I think that the right is championing this right now, but coming up, I think that legal employment is perhaps an obvious place.
Rick, it's funny. I had somebody say, if Glenn Youngkin runs, we're going to kill him on DEI, meaning you couldn't be a conservative and had wanted diversity at a company you ran. Where does this go?
I think it all has to go to the way you go about it. And, look, we have to decide whether they're going to live to a higher standard, which Lincoln outlined, saying, are we dedicated to the proposition that all men, today we say men and women, are created equal. And it was JFK who said that race has no place in American life or law. Now, he was referring to people who were discriminated against. And so The policies of both the University of North Carolina and Harvard are by nature discriminatory. Now, they discriminate against different people because there is a zero sum of people that are going to be admitted to those schools. And so they have to, so someone is going to get discriminated against one way or another. So there's a lot of talk about the Asian students are discriminated against. I think that, as I said, diversity is an important goal. But we have to acknowledge the fact that the 14th Amendment is sort of unequivocal about this. You can't say the 14th Amendment applies to a certain race at a certain time in certain conditions and then suddenly doesn't apply to a certain race under certain conditions.
I just want to note at the end, I think it's very important everyone has a definition of discriminate, an unjust or prejudicial distinction in the treatment of different categories of people, especially on the grounds of ethnicity, sex, age, or disability. Prejudicial, harmful to someone or something, unjust, not based on or behaving accordingly to what is morally right or fair. I think it is very dangerous when people start to assert that diversity initiatives that bring equity, right? Because equity means that we're not on the same playing field. You know, 214 years between the 214 years between the laws the literacy laws for enslaved people and Brown versus Board of Education. I mean, one could argue the 58-year gap. It isn't the 58 years ain't gonna make that all the way up.
Well, and what's interesting of today of all days, on affirmative action, we have a report about reparations. I wonder if this strengthens the case for advocates about reparations if you take affirmative action away. Just an
won't convince Joe Biden, let me tell you that.
For Asians or African Americans?
No, just for African Americans. Okay. For reparations for African Americans. If that is what happens in California. Anyway, Rick, Simone, Leanne, wonderful. Thank you very much. We're also following some breaking news out of Florida this afternoon. A jury has acquitted the now former sheriff's deputy who was on trial for not confronting the gunman in the Parkland High School shooting. Scott Peterson was found not guilty on 11 counts that included child neglect and culpable neglect. The 60-year-old was very emotional, broke down in tears as the verdict was read. Peterson was the only armed resource officer at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School when a gunman opened fire there in February of 2018, killing 17 people and injuring 17 others. He was charged after a 15-month investigation by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement concluded that Peterson, quote, refused to investigate the source of the gunshots, retreated during the active shooting while the victims were being shot, and directed other law enforcement who arrived on scene to remain 500 feet away from the building. Up next, NBC's exclusive interview with Mike Pence in the country of Ukraine as the presidential candidate meets with President Zelensky and urges Republican voters to embrace the fight against Russian aggression. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Vice President Mike Pence is now the first Republican candidate to visit Ukraine during the presidential campaign. He met with Ukrainian President Zelensky and visited 3 cities that were previously occupied by Russian forces. He spoke with residents and participated in a ceremony honoring Ukrainians who have been killed in the war. Pence's visit comes at a time when former President Trump and his skepticism about aid to Ukraine has been resonating with GOP primary voters. Our latest NBC News poll finds that a majority of Republican primary voters say they are less likely to vote for a candidate who supports funding for Ukraine. Well, my colleague Dasha Burns traveled to Ukraine to interview former Vice President Pence in an exclusive on his visit and his place in this version of the Republican Party.
The majority of Republican voters are less likely to support a candidate that is in support of funding for Ukraine. So this is not likely to be a campaign stop, so to speak, that is particularly fruitful for you with the GOP voters you're trying to court. So why are you here?
I'm here because it's important that the American people understand the progress that we've made and how support for the Ukrainian military has been in our national interest. I truly do believe that now more than ever we need leaders in our country who will articulate the importance of American leadership in the world. I mean, honestly, ever since we left office, it seems like the world's become more dangerous by the day. And for my part, I'm always going to step forward and speak the truth to the American people. We'll let the polls and the politics take care of themselves, but for me, it was important to be here
There is a clear and stark divide on this issue in the Republican Party, when I think, 5-10 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. So the Reagan era, the Reagan doctrine that you're talking about, do you still recognize that within the Republican Party? What do you think is going on that there is such a division on this issue that for you seems to be very clear?
Well, first off, this is bigger than politics. Let's be clear about that.
But politics has an impact.
I really do believe that if Vladimir Putin and the Russian military were able to overrun Ukraine, it wouldn't be too long before they crossed a border where our men and women in uniform would be required to go and fight. And frankly, the second half of the 21st century could look an awful lot more like the first half of the 20th century. I think we stand with the Ukrainian military here, give them what they need, so it's so much more important than politics.
And Dasha Burns joins me now from Kyiv. And Dasha, boy, I caught him doing it with you, and he does it with me. And on one hand, he wants to make such a clear contrast with his former running mate. On this issue, there's no clearer contrast between the two. Funding for Ukraine versus not. Friendship with Vladimir Putin versus not. And yet, I noticed he said since we left office. I mean, he still struggles with figuring out how much of the 4 years with Trump does he promote and how much does he criticize his former running mate.
Yeah, and it makes this visit quite complicated considering former President Trump's history with Zelensky, his history with Putin, right? And Chuck, what I saw on the ground here in and around Kyiv today was really a collision between the 2024 presidential campaign in the United States and the war here in Ukraine. And Pence really trying to carve out a unique foothold in this election, in this primary, a foothold that, like you heard me say there, would not have been so unique maybe just 5-10 years ago. But now there really is such a shift in the way that the Republican Party views this conflict, views Russia, views Ukraine. And Pence is somewhat of an outlier here. Yeah. But the way that he's having to balance, right, his very clear-eyed view that he went so far as to visit Ukraine and spend a lot of time on the ground here talking to people whose homes were destroyed, visiting important sites where atrocities were perpetrated by the Russians on the Ukrainian people. That is quite a message to send, right? At the same time, he has not fully rebuked what transpired during the Trump administration, and I want you to take a listen to some of our conversation about that. While you were vice president under the Trump administration, the former president repeatedly praised Putin, defended Putin at critical moments. Looking back, at that time, you didn't speak up publicly about that. Do you have any regrets as you stood by and watched that by his side?
Well, in 2016, as a candidate for vice president, I said Vladimir Putin was the small and bullying leader of Russia. I've never had any illusions about Vladimir Putin. That's why I was pleased that our administration was probably tougher on Russia in practical and in meaningful ways
but rhetoric
than any
matters.
Administration of the 20th century.
Rhetoric matters, and we've seen that.
Well, rhetoric doesn't matter as much as javelin missiles, which the Obama-Biden administration refused to give any military weapons to Ukraine. We came in and reversed that, and we allowed the transfer of military weapons and javelin missiles to Ukraine. They were better equipped to confront this invasion because of the support of the Trump-Pence administration.
Still, Chuck, a really significant day here and a very welcome day by the Ukrainians to see this kind of support from a presidential candidate, the first GOP presidential candidate, perhaps the only that will be visiting.
I'll be very curious about that. It's going to be fascinating to watch. You know, it is notable, the former president's last Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, went to Kyiv to visit with Zelensky, I think about a week before he decided he wasn't going to run for president himself, but in April. So now here you have Donald Trump's former vice president and former Secretary of State have both shown support for Zelensky in a party that seems to be a little leery of the whole thing. It's fascinating. Dasha Burns, on the campaign trail in Ukraine. Didn't have that in your bingo card yet. Thank you. Still to come. race and reparations. California has released recommendations to compensate black people in the state for the harms of slavery. I'm going to talk to the president of the NAACP about this development and the coincidental timing with today's historic Supreme Court ruling. You're watching Meet the President. Welcome back. On the same day the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in college campuses, a California task force unanimously approved its final recommendations for statewide reparations for black Californians. The weight of this moment in American history was not lost on the task force members, who said the court's ruling would not impact their recommendations.
I would encourage the Supreme Court to read the interim report. I would encourage them to read the final report and to understand that the legacy of enslavement, the ongoing harms, are with us to this very day. And so this country is disingenuous. First, they used race to exclude us. And now they're refusing to use race to include us.
The task force 1,100-page report recommends that California approve a state apology for racism and that they compensate eligible black Americans in California for the harms of slavery. The task force says it wants to create a reparations blueprint for the rest of the country. But despite the years of work by the task force, questions remain about when, if ever, black Californians will ever see any actual reparation payments. Joining me now is NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin. So, Dana, this was something that was passed out of the legislature to make this task force happen. Now what? What are the specifics? When does Governor Newsom have to make this decision?
Well, Chuck, it's going to be a while because this report is now going to lawmakers and they may spend the summer going through it. But the legislative session is going to end in September, so they could try to squeeze in some bills based upon these recommendations. But then it has to, again, go back and pass both houses. And then the governor, of course, has to approve it. And honestly, we've seen a little bit of not response, we'll say, from not only the governor, but also lawmakers, even Democratic lawmakers who were in support of this because, you know, they were tasked with creating this task force after the death of George Floyd. But it may have lost some momentum because a lot of people are saying we want to wait to see the final report before we say whether or not we're going to support it. Well, that report is now in. Our producers are still going through it, some 1,100 pages. And it's interesting what's in it. Some of the recommendations we can actually I'll tell you a little bit about them. It includes abolishing the death penalty, getting rid of cash bail, and also reimbursing those who have been exonerated. But take a look at the state budget and how much this could all cost. If these reparations are implemented, including cash reparations, it could cost the state some $800 billion. Right now, the current budget that was just approved on Tuesday by Governor Newsom is some $300 billion, and there's a $32 deficit. So whether or not people receive cash reparations, it's going to be a long road before we see that.
You've certainly laid out what could end up absolutely being legislative obstacles there. Dana Griffin reporting for us from California. Dana, thank you. We took a deep dive into the battle over reparations, particularly what's going on in California, on a recent episode of Meet the Press Reports. Take a look at it. Stream it right now or right after we're done with this segment on Peacock, YouTube, wherever you stream your programming. And joining me now is Derrick Johnson. He's president and CEO of the NAACP. And boy, where to begin? And I know we booked you to talk about the California report today. Obviously, we've got affirmative action. Let me just start with, you know, the whole premise of the NAACP was to fight on behalf of African Americans for rights that weren't given to them. And then the government took over that for a while, and I guess now it's back all on your shoulders. Am I over-exaggerating here a little bit?
I don't think you're over-exaggerating. I think you're spot on, and it's always been on African-American shoulders to blaze a trail to ensure equal access and equal treatment under the law. Today is the bookend reality of where we've always been, a Supreme Court who are opining to deny African-Americans opportunities, and a commission who was pushing forward a set of recommendations to ensure that African Americans, the descendants of slaves, the descendants of Jim Crow, are made whole because of federal government sponsored discrimination. And so that's where we are.
You know, it's interesting to put the two together. if there were reparations, maybe we wouldn't need affirmative action?
And that could be the case. You know, the thing about this report is not just about money. It's about public policy and the harms that public policy have done against African Americans. And so there's an overemphasis on the money, and money should be a part of it, absolutely. But if we don't fix the public policy, how African Americans still today are being mistreated through the implementation of laws, we're going to find ourselves in this same conversations for 3 additional decades.
Do you expect to be in court a lot more than you were before this ruling on whether it's employment or college admissions?
Well, that's the nature of the NAACP. Our role is to make democracy work, to ensure equal protection under the law is afforded to everyone. So we was in court in 1930, we was in court in 1920, we've been in court in 1960. And I believe until society embrace diversity and treat all citizens equally, we will be in court 30 years from now.
What do you think a university, let's take the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. They want to have a diverse campus. How do you think they're going to have to go about it? What would, if they come to you and say, help us do this within the confines of the Supreme Court ruling, what would you recommend?
Well, I commend the president in his speech today to talk about an adversity standard, a standard that takes into account one's ability to pay for college or the history of the family, take into account whether or not that individual have faced adversity, including discrimination, take into account the quality of education, because we know that where a person goes to school, that zip code determine whether or not that person has been denied access to a quality education. An adversity standard is race neutral, but it could address the very ills that we have spoken about for decades now. Public policy sanctioned violence against the African American community through the denial of equal opportunity and access to a quality of life.
So is there legislation to be passed, or is this more of we got to expect institutions to develop their own policies?
Well, for us, we are an advocacy group, so we're going to be pushing for public policy. If the court said we cannot use race as a standard because of strict scrutiny, we have to look at a race-neutral policy. And I think the president today, in his speech, led the way. An adversity standard, I can support that. I grew up in the city of Detroit during a decline of the city, and resources was taken out of education. And because of that, many of my schoolmates did not make it out of the many traps that was put in front of them. That is unfair, and we're robbing this nation of a future that's inclusive and of the best talented individuals.
How do you harness this following sort of conundrum of public opinion? There's broad general agreement we need diversity. And then when you say, okay, but we're going to have to do it this way to get it. No, don't do that. Right? Everybody's for diversity as long as it doesn't impact them. I'm being a little facetious, but how do you harness that?
Well, let's be clear. The American public, by 63%, said to the Supreme Court, do not mess with affirmative action. So there's strong public support for diversity, and we must embrace diversity at all costs. It's going to be hard. Some people will be uncomfortable, but there's a track record for that. People didn't support reparations for Japanese Americans in internment camp. You still have people who are Holocaust deniers, but people should be made whole. When there's state-sanctioned violence through public policy or physical, there should be state-sanctioned repair.
Interesting way to put it, state-sanctioned. Very important phrase there. Derrick Johnson, president of NAACP, thanks for coming on, sharing your perspective.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being with us this hour. We'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. The news continues with my friend Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.